Hello and welcome to the Weaponized Marriage Podcast. I'm your host, Kendra Hewitt,
And I'm host Ryan Hewitt.
and today's topic is
We're going to talk about the two R's, as you put it, resentment and reactivity.
ooh,
Why did you pick that topic?
oh man, diving right into it. Well, we were having this organic conversation, I think, about this that I was telling Ryan that I was listening to one of our a podcast, and some of the concept that was coming up is about how like resentment is a natural, more natural, seems to become a more natural. I don't want to say, would you say habit or like a reaction? It's not
No, it'd be like a net tendency.
tendency. Okay, that's where I wanted. More natural tendency for females. And then I was saying about how like men, it seems to be more that it's like reactivity. And I think both of those things, resentment and reactivity.
And I think both men and women can do either or.
Oh yes, absolutely.
But yes, I think you're right. I think women more so harbor resentment, and men more so are all about the fight.
Yeah. So how we got into this conversation, we were talking and I was sharing with Ryan about I just got back from a trip with my mom and my daughter Lily, and I took them down to Charleston, South Carolina. We had such a good time. It was great. It was April vacation.
Trip.
It was Lily's first girls trip, and man,
She was stoked.
She was into it.
No boys.
And I was sharing just like some of the like really magic moments I had that like taking my mom out of her environment. My mom's 76. And I don't want to say she's retired, but she's on the brink of retirement, whether she wants to admit that or not. And it was an opportunity to get her out of her environment and just really, I told Ryan I wanted to do this trip because I wanted to, it was a little bit impromptu. Like it wasn't like we've been planning it for a while. And just to really get some data on like where she was at in her day-to-day life. But I couldn't really see that in her routine. Just by like going to visit her and helping her, when she needs it and that sort of thing. So I was sharing about how some of the acceptance I feel like I've got to with where she's at. And one of the things that came out of it was I was also sharing, and this is going to be a really funny example, but like, should I share about your lunch?
Yeah.
Okay, because that's how we got into the conversation. So I just got back last night, and one of the really nice things was Ryan. Last night when he got home from work, I was here and I had made dinner, and we just took some time to like connect. And Lily wanted to see him before bed, and so he ended up putting her to bed. And I just went downstairs, got ready for her day back at school. And then we sat down on the couch and we just really connected. And in the past, I would have felt like very like, oh my God, I haven't been like seen Ryan for 5 days. Like we have a lot of ground to cover. He's going to want to like connect physically right away. And instead, this time, like you actually took the time to really connect with me in terms of talk, like emotionally connect with me. And I was telling him that like I noticed that you put an effort into that. And then how the conversation evolved was he let me go to bed and like let me get to sleep. And then we did get to physically connect because like I was in a much better like place. It wasn't like, okay, I gotta make sure I take care of Ryan kind of attitude. And I was sharing about how another couple we really admire was talking about a very similar thing about how he was like on the road for 7 days and he came back. And in the old days, he was saying he would come back and he'd be like, all right, I've been out producing for my family and like out like, banging nails and, not physically hunting buffalo. Right. And all I want is my like to come home and my wife to like I want to get laid and I want to like it to be amazing. And he was talking about how for the first time ever on this trip, he had started to make some shifts where he like made a conscious effort to connect with his wife via FaceTime every day. And he also came from a place where he was starting to respect. They have 5 kids, they have 2 toddlers, and then their 2 older daughters are younger. Their sons moved out of their house. And but what he was saying was that they had just without him knowing, while he was gone, they got another dog. And the dog had kept the wife up, like, a couple of nights in a row, but she didn't wanna complain, so she didn't tell him. So anyways, so he's coming back into this atmosphere where he was like, "I'm ready to go," kind of thing, but instead of, "I'm ready to go," meaning, like, sexually, he was like, "I'm gonna just go into bed and I'm gonna cuddle her," and, like, he was saying about how he got in bed and she was like, "I just need to get some sleep, and then we can connect." And about how in the past, he would have been very reactive to that because he would have been like, "Bitch, I've been working my
He would
ass off."
say
He
bitch.
wouldn't say that, I know.
No.
But he would be like, "I've been working my ass off." In his mind, what he is like,
Well, he would have been reactive or resentful or both.
or he would have been reactive because he felt rejected is how
Rejected,
he
yes, because
he
that
explained.
triggered an old pattern,
Because it triggered an old
which I
pattern.
relate to, which is what attracted me to Warrior because I
Yeah.
would always feel the same way.
Yes, and so the reason that I started sharing this story with Ryan was because, like, I knew that you felt similar. So, anyways, I made a conscious effort to also, like, bring this up in our conversation today about, like, "Hey, I noticed that, like, you took the time to connect." We did get to talk on our trip my trip, quite a bit, not, like, at, like, regular times, but, like, when we did, it was meaningful. And so fast forward to this morning, even I was telling Ryan, I didn't tell him at the time, but he had said like, "Hey man," he's like, "I know you've been on the road with Lily and your mom and it's a lot of caretaking and now I'm going to be away this weekend." And I just like, you didn't say it this way, but you said like, "I know that's a lot for you." And I was telling him that he opened up this window for me where I was like, "Man," I was like, I felt like I didn't want him to offer to help me. I didn't want him to, um, give me solutions. I just was like, just that he acknowledged that, like, me leaving again, meaning you, was a lot of effort on my part, and, like, you acknowledged and appreciated it, like, gave me this window of freedom. So, get to the lunch part. So I turn around, Ryan says this, he leaves for the day, and I was like, "Oh, man," I was like, "He's never kinda really said anything, like, acknowledged that before." And, so I turn around in his lunch, he just made his lunch, and if you know Ryan, he eats a lot and you don't want him
Well,
hangry.
second breakfast.
Okay, that was his second breakfast, but I knew he had, like, a long
No.
day of like, stuff that he needed to do. So I was like, "Alright." I was like, "Here's your choices." This is me talking to myself. I was like, "I can bring his lunch to the office, which is gonna be about an hour out of my day. I'm gonna miss my workout because of it. Or I can just, like, let him, like, go into my old pattern of, like, what an idiot. Like, he wasted all that time for his lunch, and then he left again because he didn't check, like, the counter before he left or whatever."
Okay, because you don't ever leave the house with food. It's an automatic anytime you leave the house, you come back in the
At
house
minimum 3
3
times.
times.
Okay. So, anyways, I decided I dropped Lily off from school, and I was like, "I'm gonna skip my workout, and I'm gonna bring the lunch." So I bring the lunch, and the best part was I pull in, I didn't tell him, and I could see him out in his car looking for his lunch, putting 2 and 2 together that his second lunch or second breakfast is missing, and so is his water bottle.
Yeah,
So, I
double
see him
whammy.
walk in, and then, I kinda walking behind him, and he had gone to the bathroom, and our office manager, Evelyn, was like, "Oh my god, he's just bitching about how he left his food on the desk, on the counter." And I was like, "Well, I decided." But here was where we come to the resentment and reactivity. In the past too, even doing something like that to help you out in the like, when we were especially when we were in a bad place, I would have done that, but I would have resented it.
Well, you wouldn't always have done that, but if you chose to do it, then you would have resented it, yes.
Yeah, and I would have, like, made you not I don't wanna say made you reminded you, but I would have, like, brought it up where, like, I wanted, like, some acknowledgement that I went out of my way to do something for you, and then it was seldom not there. And, um, the reason I bring up the appreciation and the acknowledgement because it gave me this window of freedom where I can be like, "Listen, you get to choose today if you're gonna do something nice for him, like, that he just forgot to do, or if you're gonna just, like, let him be on his own." And, um, ironically had texted me when I got there. He's like, "Oh man, I forgot my friggin' food." And he's like, "I'm gonna have to come home and, get it before I go to my appointment and stuff like that." And it felt good to do something nice for you that I know you appreciated, um, and not have like anything attached to it.
Mhm.
And it just reminded me about how like it's so easy in a marriage to get in this tit for tat kind of resentment. And like I said at the beginning, it's so easy for females to go right to the resentment. I'll do this, but you shouldn't do that again. Or you should do this differently. Or, like, and that resentment builds up. And I think the problem that the resentment builds up is a huge problem for most women. Because what happens is it doesn't get released versus the reactivity in a male, which is more common in males, I think, than females, even though I agree we both have a little bit of both. It's released. Like when it's reactive, it's usually not appropriately released, but it's like, you shouldn't have done that, or whatever it is, however that reactivity comes out for you. Um, but it gave me this kind of glimpse in a new operating system I feel like we're working towards,
Mhm.
where it's like starting to really acknowledge of like, am I making this choice out of obligation, resentment, or is it real choice? Because I wanted to show you that like I cared about you and I knew that it was important that you had your lunch.
Mhm.
Um, so that's what I want to talk about today is just like getting past like the resentment. And one of the things that I came up for me a lot was I had talked recently a little bit about this, and we haven't dived into this too much, but um just like I was telling Ryan about how like I realized sometimes how much I resent parts of our business of things that I had to like keep doing even though I either sucked at them or I didn't feel like I was equipped to do. But I would just suck it up. And I think that I remember when we first started CrossFitting. This is funny. I digress, but I
No,
had this
don't
I
digress.
I won't, but I had this shirt that said "Suck it up, Buttercup." Do you remember that shirt?
Mhm.
It was like a tank top,
Mhm.
and I thought about it. I was like, about the day that I threw that shirt away, right? Because I was just like, "This isn't a fucking attitude I wanna have anymore."
Mhm.
Like, I don't want to grin and bear it. I don't want to be described as, "That girl's got grit." Like, she can get through messy shit. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and I don't really know how to articulate this well, but all of a sudden I feel like there's been some sort of shift in me, where I've started to realize that, like, man, I had so much resentment and
Mhm.
only because for all different things.
Well, I think the resentment it started out maybe in business, and then it became with sex, I think. And then, of
Mhm.
course, so I mean, it's complicated, right? And
It's layered.
well, I think where couples can relate is that like you became resentful about sex because you didn't feel appreciated. And then
Mhm.
I became
Or connected. Or
or
connected.
connected. And then,
Or safe.
okay, anything else? And then I became, well, resentful but angry, right? And the anger would come out as reactivity because I wasn't getting what I wanted, which was
Mhm.
like intimate, connected sex. So we both weren't getting what we wanted, but we just didn't realize, like, I guess, why that was happening.
Mhm.
Do you know what I mean? And I think a lot of like married couples get to that place. And I think it's part of that whole like 5 year, 6 year, 7 year itch, like that happens with everybody because it's like by then you fully know each other, you know all each other's shit, and you've been through the process and like you get into status quo and stagnant. And I think like stagnant for guys is like, okay, well, I'm just going to put my head down. I'm going to work. I'm going to like bring home the bacon and that's my job. And I, should be rewarded by my wife, with what I need, which is like physical touch and connection and sex. Meanwhile, the wife is, doing her thing, whether it's working or whether it's like, taking care of the
Shopping.
kids, whatever it is. Yeah, whatever, however the relationship is working. And then she's like, well, fuck him. He's like, he's not around enough. He's not making
Mhm.
me feel appreciated. He's like dropped the ball on acts of service. He's not planning date nights. And the woman builds up resentment without like articulating to the guy, like, hey, you know what I really need in order. And the thing is, it's like tip for women, like if you want your guy to be like crushing it in life, just like, you know, like make him feel like he can do anything and have sex with him. And like those are like superpowers like every wife has over their husband.
So
Hold on. And the thing is like it's it's it becomes like a suck it up for the wife though if it's not being reciprocated by the guy and making her feel like beautiful and appreciated, um, and like fulfilling her needs. And everyone has different love languages, of course, but
Mhm,
that was where we ended up. And it would come out in these little ways, like keeping score. Like
mhm.
keeping score when you're saying tit for tat is like, oh, well, I had sex with you like yesterday. So like, what the fuck? Like, why do I need to touch you today? Like I'm up 2-0. Like, why aren't you pulling your weight? And there's less of that keeping score if you both feel like you see each other and you're like when you came home and you're like, oh, I really want to do something nice for Ryan and bring him his lunch. And like, oh, I want to make Kendra feel like I see her and all the efforts she's putting in for Lily and spending all this time with her. And like, while she's gone, I'll put together, stay up late, put together this chair because I know she'd appreciate it when she gets home. Like, those are things that wouldn't happen in the past because I guess it's just like learning the lessons the hard way
Mhm,
of knowing like, hey, it's not deserving, what I want, but it's more like, I guess, earning the
it's
like,
earning love.
yeah, I don't want to use that. Like earning love is just not because you shouldn't have to earn love. I think that's fucked up. You shouldn't have to earn love. But I think like part of being in love and making a marriage work is like you can't be all about yourself.
Mhm.
Right?
Yeah,
You're signing a contract that it's like this is a team, and if you want to be a team, and if you've ever played team sports, like how well does that work when like the team superstar, the captain is like all about their
hogging the
stats?
ball.
Yeah, hogging the ball or
No one likes the
fuck
ball hogger.
basketball, the puck, right? Hogging the puck, scoring all the goals, slamming his stick on the ice because he's not getting the pass.
Starting fights.
Yeah, nobody likes that guy. Like, that's not a leader. That's not like a good teammate. That's not someone who like has earned the respect of the team, and they're not going to run through a
Mhm,
wall for that guy or girl, right? So I think that it's really easy to pop into that default after a period of time of like, what do I need to do to like make this life work? And then
yeah, and I think you're hitting on a huge pattern here too, because it's like, so what happens? Like, let's talk about the scenario, because I think that will help the people that are listening too. Is like, so the scenario, how it played out for us, anyways, is like Ryan just worked harder. Like,
yeah,
and
because I think like, okay, well, if I work harder,
yes,
then you'll love me more and I'll try to make more money, and
yes,
that's what you want.
yep. And then he physically escaped by just like physically beating his body into the ground. Like that's basically
Well,
that's how you connected with
that's how
yourself.
I connected with myself, and that's how I felt like I had power in my life,
Yes.
like, I feel like I have control.
Yeah. And, then when it comes to me, like, I would just shut up and not rock the boat until, like, the boat was, like, starting to sink, and then I would just, like, instead of bailing water, I'd just add, like, it would be, like, poke a hole, and then, a slow hole because I didn't have the courage to confront some of the things that, like.
Yeah, because then it would come out as reactivity on my part because you
Mhm,
didn't wanna confront the real problems because then I wouldn't take it well, and I would react, right? So, and then you think like, "Oh, well, all this resentment I have inside, I'm better off holding it in."
yeah,
Right? And then that is a recipe for divorce. It's a recipe for, like, resentment. It's a recipe for, like, indifference, in a marriage. And like, if you have any sort of like indifference, resentment, or you lose respect for each other, like it's not a matter of if, but when,
yeah.
you
And even, like, Steven, our
divorce.
therapist, I remember, like, he talks about this all the time, that indifference is the one thing that's going to happen in your marriage, but it's also the one thing that can either make or break it.
Well, you either recognize right where you're at and do something about it,
Mhm.
or you tell yourself a different story, like, oh, this is
Yeah.
this is the end. This is not the
Yep.
right person.
Or you take like you take responsibility for your part in it, that's when you
Well,
can
that's what
start to
has to
change,
happen.
right? But a couple things I wanted to say on that. One is that so on another podcast I was listening to this week is it was Garrett, who's our Garrett's founder, Wake Up Warrior, and his wife Danielle. They're awesome. Their podcast is called Date Your Wife. And they were talking about how Garrett was sharing that he has a program called Porn to Power. And it's targeting men that are numbing with porn to like take back and step into their power. And he was talking about how his ads were always like get laid and get paid. And that he has since found in the last couple months that the marketing has completely shifted, that he has to market to men that are feeling alone. Because men are feeling so emotionally distant,
Mhm.
that they are trying to fill up with, and they were joking about it and about how like AI is now starting coming up where they're going to have robots, like dating robots or whatever, like where you could
Right.
have a relationship with like AI because they
Oh
talk
my
back
god.
to you, right?
Yeah.
And
That's scary.
which is even more scary to think of. Like we're in a such a like change of times, right? So, and then he was talking about, he was asking Danielle, he's like, do you know what Ashley Madison is? So he asked Chat GPT on the podcast. He was like, cause she didn't know. Right. And it was like Chat GPT answered and Garrett calls it her. So I'm like, maybe, I guess it is like her. So, and they said, oh, Ashley Madison is a website for extramarital affairs targeted at women
Really?
who feel not seen.
Okay.
That's how ChatGPT
Yeah.
and I was like, "Holy shit." And then they brought up this other example that I thought was really critical that I feel like we have to go to. Because, part of Garrett's marketing has always been, like I said, get paid, get laid, and we had this kind of running joke is that the marketing to females or the marketing for men that wanna, like, like, change their marriages is to teach them how to see their woman and let their woman be seen and safe. And
Mhm.
those are the two primary drivers of a female.
Yeah.
And I think that's on a primal level. And so he was very interesting because the guest he had on was a woman that was also in like Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. She's like a, like silent killer, he was calling her. And he asked the guy he was interviewing, who has very big like stature, good presence, not some guy you would fuck with in an alley, right? And he was like, "When was the last time you felt safe or unsafe?"
Who, the guy or the
He
girl?
asked the guy,
Okay.
and he goes, "When I ask men this question, it is extremely rare for a man to say recently,
Yeah.
right?"
Right.
And he goes, "And when I ask women this question, they can usually think within a 24-hour period."
Mhm.
And so he asked the woman, the jujitsu woman, and she's like, "Oh my god, even yesterday, I was in Walmart and I was in an aisle that was kind of dark, and a guy walked in the aisle, and she's like, immediately, she's like, I shifted, like, and she's like, and I'm not like,
Mhm.
like if he pulled something on me, I could fucking take him down." She's like, but they
In a
were
Walmart?
talking about how it's a like it's a primal instinct, right? To feel safe. And then they started challenging some of like how we've been raised. And so that's where I also think is that some of this resentment building comes from is that I don't come from this generation. I'm kind of in the squeeze, but my mom was a boomer and it was like the patriarchal upbringing of like the woman stays home, the woman does the house job like work and all this kind of stuff. And it's like there were a lot of women that wasn't what they wanted to be doing. It was just what they had for a choice, or so they thought. And then we look at the feminist movement, which kind of really backfired. And now we look at the movement you were talking about, which is what's the movement and we're like about like men that are pussies, right?
Well, I don't know where you're going with this, but yeah, I mean, it went from a place of like, whatever decades it was, the patriarchal, MO, as you put it, right?
Yeah.
So it was like old school is what you'd
Yeah.
call it, right? And then the feminism movement happened, women power, and then the whole Me Too, and then it's the pendulum swung all the way in the other direction, and now we have um, with the new generation of boys and men,
Demasculated men.
yeah, so we have a lot of demasculated men. So like the whole concept of masculinity is very unknown, unrecognized, or just like they don't know what it is. What is it to be a man, right? And you had originally wanted to talk about on this podcast is like um letting your man lead, and we'll probably do that on a different podcast. But I think that
I'm getting
because
there.
yeah, because the pendulum has swung so far in the direction of like, women having a voice and women, in the workplace and all stuff, which I think is fantastic, of course, like
Mhm.
that is like all women should be like so we have a saying that it's like, well, women are equal but not the same when it
Mhm.
comes to men and women, right? There's a yin and a yang, and there's always going to be polarity and like male and female energy, right? But the thing is, like, the messaging for the guys is like, the women need to lead now. Like, you need to like um, change the way you approach women, and basically, there's just a lot of
Engage with them.
there's a ton of confusion about like, well, what do I do now? What is it to be a man? And that's the escapes are so easy now to achieve for a boy or like a 20-30 year old who's just like, man, this dating thing is like not working for me. I don't know like how to attract a female. I don't know how to be a man, so I'll just like fulfill my needs with like pornography or with whatever AI, or like
Mhm.
I'll just be alone. Like the stats are all there. Like there's way more single people now than ever before, right? So I don't know where you're going with kind of that.
So what I was saying is that, like, I think it was, like, resentment for a female, and again, I'm
Mhm,
speaking for myself, but I think really comes down to is, like, we've kind of been taught to, like, be seen but not heard.
mm,
And I think that Me Too kind of tried to go in that direction. It didn't end up in that direction, in my opinion. But, the reason I'm saying that is that, like, I think it's just kind of like a cultural, like a silent cultural upbringing that it's like, "Hey, don't bring up what you're mad about or things that bother you, like, don't rock the boat." I also do think there's some personality stuff in that, but I know for me, I didn't really realize, like, how much resentment I harbored on certain things that I kept to myself, and then now, like, this shift that I'm talking about is kinda stepping into this freedom of, like, "Hey, I do have a choice," and which means I need to change my story of, like, what I'm telling myself.
mhm,
And I mean, I know you and I both teach this so much, but it's like it all comes down to the story you're telling. And I think that I'm in this place where some of the stories that I've had for a long time that I've been resisting changing,
mhm.
I'm starting to slowly kind of like crack a little bit of like,
Right.
or bend what we call bend the frame on.
Mhm,
Because I just realized I was like, man, I don't want to live that way. Like, even like I said, I'm not going to drive your lunch to you if I
yeah.
am going to bitch about it
Well, if you
after.
can hold it over my head, like,
Yeah,
yeah.
and, like, one of the things that hurts me the most is when you get mad at me when you say, like, "Oh, you're gonna hold this over my head?" Like, that drives me bonkers because I was like, "Dude, I don't wanna be that person."
No.
Um, and I think that's an old conditioning pattern from some of the way that I was grew up.
Mm,
With kinda like guilt and shame of like, "You owe me this," or whatever, but I wanna come back to one thing that you said, which was the earning love, because I think that that's, so interesting that you brought that up because that was one of my old
no, no,
stories.
you said that and it came out and I was like, "No, that's not
Yes, but here's the thing, the reason
true."
that I said that was because that was one of my old stories, is what
Mhm,
I was saying is that I really realized, prior to my relationship with Ryan, a couple of my relationships, like, they were always kind of business that turned into a relationship because in my mind,
because of what you could do.
I was always earning love because that's how I thought you got love. And I had to really start to shift that story that, like, you loved me. I didn't have to prove myself, which was the story I had to shift to kind of step out of the business. And then when I started to step out of the day to day business, especially when I had Lily, I really wrestled with that because I very quickly learned that, like, hey, being a stay-at-home mom was a way harder job than actually being in the office.
Mhm,
And we kinda joked about this with the Tough Ruck a couple weeks ago. Ryan did the Tough Ruck, which is 26.2-mile marathon with a rucksack. And, it took him 6 plus hours. He was there at 5 AM. And at the end of the day, he came home. I'm like, I don't know who's done more steps or who's more tired, you or me, because I had Lily from 6 a.m. and it was a holiday and she's overstimulated. And we joked about it that next year we're going to switch roles. He's going to be Mr. Mom all day and I'm
Yeah,
going to be the
right.
tough ruck.
I'd rather do the tough rec.
And that was what the joke was. And the reason I'm bringing that up is that but just even like I said, thinking about those little examples I used today of like where you're starting to verbalize some of the things that you're more grateful for and appreciate and just recognize, that's part of you starting to see me
Mhm.
that has allowed me to give the freedom to have a little bit more grace and let some of the resentment go.
Yeah, but
Like,
that's what men need to do in order to, like, free up their wives,
yeah.
right? I think it's just eventually you get to a place where you're just like, "All right, something needs to be different, and there's so much work to do, I just don't know where to start."
Hmm.
And whether whether the resentment is with sex or whether it's with, like, time or with the kids or whatever, like, I think that, like, the guys work, and this is speaking for me and what I've had like, learned to do is, like, you're right, it's about, um, recognition and appreciation and, like, making an effort when it comes to, like, things that or things that are valuable to you as far as, like, ways that I'm contributing, like, I know you value my contribution when it comes to business, right? Or
Hmm.
when it comes to physical safety, like, those are just things that, like, as a man, I'm naturally wired to want to do,
Hmm.
but they're not necessarily, like, things that attract you to me or that are gonna wanna make you, like, feel safe and open up, whether it's talking to me about your resentment or talking to me about the thing talking to me about the things that are gonna make you feel more connected to me, right?
Hmm.
Because ultimately, that's what I want is to be connected to you, and I think that's what men want is they want to
Hmm.
like you're saying that Garrett's messaging has changed, that they're, um, like, marketing to guys that feel alone, which that's a massive, massive thing,
Hmm.
and really, it's just the missing piece is the connection, and the difference is, like, we are so connected, you could call it, as far as, like, social media and, like,
Mm.
whatnot, but as far as having, like, real authentic connection, I think that's what people are starving for, and if you learn how to do that with your wife, like, you can work on that indefinitely, and it only gets better, right? Because, like, ultimately for me at least, like, and I think for you, but maybe more so for men, like, sex and, like, penetration and, like, that's the ultimate expression or, like, feeling of connection,
Mhm.
and that's truly what, like, I crave and desire.
Well, it's also release too, right? Like,
Yeah, and it's release, but, like, part of what made me open up this morning and talk to you about, like, "Hey, I really recognize all the time you're spending with Lily, and I wanna make sure that you know that I really appreciate it, and I love that you've got to spend time with her, and I know it's gonna be, like, a little bit longer before I'm able to really pitch in more, because I'm going on a trip." Like, I felt like I could open up like that because you because you had sex with me, and I felt like it was connected sex.
mhm,
But that didn't happen unless I was able to receive you when you came home from the trip the way you wanted me to.
mhm,
Do you know what I mean? So it's just like it's a back and forth, it's a
mhm,
dance.
mhm,
And we were awful at that before. We
mhm.
could not do that,
Yep.
right? And, it was both of us, but, like, I see how I used to operate, and it's just so much different than what I do now. Um, and
And
that
it's
that
overcome, like, that's how like, why I wanted to talk about the reactivity and the resentment because it's like you have overcome so much of your reactivity. Um, and I think that would be a good place to close it out is like, what are some of the things that you did?
Mhm,
Because I think there are a lot of men that battle with that. And
mhm,
it might not be just on sex, like it might be totally different related, right? And like I
yeah.
said, me coming from a place of starting to chip away at the resentment. Um,
Yeah, let me put it this way. So you can talk. I'll talk about the reactivity in closing and give a couple of things to think about, and then you can close with
okay.
the resentment. So what I found is like I don't know if you've ever there was somebody who triggered you, for example, like whether it's like somebody. like you find yourself short when you're driving in the car and someone cuts you off and you flip out, right? Or somebody says something
You
that,
don't do that, do you,
no,
Ryan?
not anymore much, maybe before. You know what I'm saying? Like somebody will be say something to you and you might have this like response that's completely reactive and you regret later on how you responded. I know I've done that like very rarely, but with a team member, or I've done it with you, or I've
You just shared a story where you
Mhm.
did recently.
Yeah. So there's always like when that explosion happens, there's always a flame that's already lit, right?
Mhm.
There's already something there that all it takes is a little bit of fuel and it's boom, right? If that situation happens and there's no flame, then there's no reaction, right? You're
Mhm.
able to receive that, you're able to process it, you're able to like respond instead of react. And I've just realized that and I think what you need to, if you're finding yourself in certain people or with certain situations or whatever it is, like when you find yourself reactive, like to be able to get quiet and to think about, well, what is the flame that's there already? Whether it's like a certain person that triggers you often, or
Mhm.
let's say it's your wife, for example, right? Like, and that's all the work that we've done of like, hey, when you say this is it reminds me of when my mom used to talk to me that way.
Mhm.
Or like when it's like reactivity out of insecurity, it's like, well, I know where that insecurity comes from, from when I was younger. And the first step to really understanding where the reactivity comes from is like recognition. Now, changing it is a whole other,
Mhm.
you know, skill set, but it all has to start with like wanting to recognize why that anger, that reactivity comes up, because no matter what, you can't stuff it. You can't just forget about it. You can't like just move on and pretend it won't happen again, because it will. So the work always starts with like recognizing where that flame is already lit.
That's good.
Um, and then I think the work is all about like processing, whether it was like something that has happened to you or whether it's a story you tell yourself,
Mhm.
um, whether it's something that was instilled in you by someone you looked up to when you were younger.
Mhm.
It's just all about creating like a new story or a new like way of a new operating system,
Yeah.
beyond that. So that's what Lily saw.
Hey, Lil, we'll be right down.
Do you want to say anything else before you wrap it up?
I think that was a strong end to a close.
Okay. Well, we're gonna wrap it up because we got a toddler racing up the stairs in a hat in bunny ears. All right. Do you want to wrap up the podcast?
As always, can you say hey? As always, if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with someone you think might benefit from this information. And as always, rate, review, and subscribe. What do you have to say, Lils?
We'll see you next week.
Can
Wrap
you
it up.
say see you next week?
Wrap it up.
Bug.
Okay. All right.